Hi everybody. I want to do another short little video about the readings for this week. And the readings were Applying Moral Principles to Growth Management by Timothy Beatley. It was an article that is written in the early 1980s, and it's important to realize when it was written, it was really a response to all the growth management, the state growth management programs that were enacted in the late 1970s and 1980s. And Timothy Beatley asked some really interesting questions related to these growth management programs that I want to go over to you. One of the interesting questions here is growth management was trying to limit the ability of people to come somewhere. And Beatley really asked, well, how do you deal with that? How do you deal as a planner with people that are not there yet? They cannot be involved in the planning process. So this was a really interesting challenge that he asked. How do you deal with people that aren't even there yet, that you cannot include in the planning process, but are clearly going to be impacted by the decisions you made? So let's go and talk about this for a second. And the first thing I want to do is I want to go to the Planning Code of Ethics. The AICP Planning Code of Ethics. The AICP is the American Institute of Certified Planners. They have a code of ethics, and the code of ethics include the behavior or the kind of things that we should abide by. And the first paragraph is, or first section is section 1, our overall responsibility to the public. And I want to highlight a couple of things that are in the, so that you understand what the issue here is. So it says in the Code of Ethics that our primary obligation is to serve the public interest. Now, interesting enough, it's really kind of difficult to figure out what is public interest. And when you think about the reading that you had to do before, the reading by Friedman, about talking about market rationality and social rationality, what really serves the public interest, and what is that public interest? I had a law professor when I was at the University of Illinois, and he says, as a planner, the most important thing to do is to sit down and write down for yourself what you define as the public interest. Because one time you will get sued. It's going to happen. And it's very good to have written down very clearly what you define as being the public interest. Now, I'm not going to do that right now, but I am going to focus on a couple of things that according to our Code of Ethics we should be looking at. So here's the first thing. It says we shall give people the opportunity to have meaningful impact on the development of plans and programs that may affect them. Participation should be broad enough to include those who lack formal organization or influence. So as planners, we pride ourselves on the fact that we try to make sure that everybody who is impacted by our decisions is involved. Well, that was a problem with growth management, because the people that were going to be impacted by our decisions were not there yet. They could not be involved in the decision-making process. The thing I want to focus on is the next section that says we shall seek social justice by working to expand choice and opportunity for all persons, recognizing a special responsibility to plan for the needs of the disadvantaged and to promote racial and economic integration. We shall urge the alteration of policies, institutions, and decisions to oppose such needs. So it's very clear in our Code of Ethics that it says something about social rationality. We should really look at those people that are disadvantaged, and we need to make sure that we really pay attention to that particular group and make sure that they are involved. Now, the way that planners typically interpret that was that they opposed, typically without saying so much as that, they opposed the utilitarian decision-making model. And instead, what they, without saying it, very quietly adopted was an egalitarian decision-making model. So if they made at different scenarios, they typically would look at which one has a more egalitarian outcome, which one makes people more equal, makes people more the same, rather than the one which has the biggest impact on the entire society. Now, what Beatley challenged with is that we just decided to do that as planners. We really never gave it any thought. And in his article, he argues that a better approach might be to use a Rawlsian approach. Right? So instead of using this kind of egalitarian approach, which we just kind of adopted, maybe we should look at Rawls and some of the things that Rawls are saying. So what I want you to do is when you read this article is just think about this context of this was all about growth management, where the people that are going to be most impacted by the decisions are not actually there to make decisions, or cannot be involved in the decision-making process. And then the second thing is that if you make decisions, what ethical theory would work the best? Which ethical theory do you want to apply in these kind of decisions? And Beatley, of course, uses 4. He uses utilitarian, he uses egalitarian, equal shares, and Rawlsian. And he suggests that maybe we should learn something from the Rawlsian approach. Now, regardless of what moral theory you feel is more important, Beatley does not ultimately address the important challenge with growth management, which of course is, should you include future residents in planning decisions, since they will be the most impacted when you put some kind of growth limitations in place? So I'll leave that up to you. How do you deal with making planning decisions that are going to have an impact on a future generation or on future residents while they're not involved? And I want you to think about this for a second in the context of the AICP Code of Ethics. Because the AICP Code of Ethics says under 1B, we shall have special concern for the long-range consequences of present action. So we have to look at the long term. And it also says we shall provide timely, adequate, clear, and accurate information on planning issues to all affected persons and to governmental decision makers. All right, just think about this. All affected persons in the case of growth management are people that are not currently there. So how do you deal with that as a planner? And if you know the answer, you can see Beatley has not given an answer. So enjoy the readings. If you have any other questions or comments, please post them on the discussion board.